I think I'm ready for another CIRF report. Man, this week has got me confused as to there's a lot of energies, a lot of big energies that are competing for each other for dominance. And so I'm calling this just the biggest energy week of 2022. It is nice and organized, as you're going to see, especially on the eclipse day. We have an eclipse, we have Venus, Cazimi, we've got a grand air trine, we've got some other alignments that really pump up that grand air trine, making every energy elevated. So there's a lot happening, and we'll get to all those astrology layouts, lots of squares, by the way. And the I-Ching says great abundance. Well, this has everything to do with Venus conjunct Sun, otherwise known as Venus Cazimi. And it's like a super Venus. And while that's happening, she's going to start that process in Libra, so in home. And it's this great abundance. It's everything Venus is accelerated, it's big, it's bold. And it's should be obvious. That precedes the partial solar eclipse, which that one's in Scorpio. It's a new moon, basically. And that's a big one. But Venus isn't Cazimi still. So Venus is back to being weakened, now in a Scorpio energy in a new cycle, but still conjunct with the sun and moon for the next 6-month snapshot. So, and that's not even it. That's still just scratching the surface. So big tidal waves of energy. And one of those tidal waves right in the middle of our CIRF week is going to be great abundance. And we're going to go through that. But that's not the only one. There's the passions and obsessions with Scorpio. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the grand air trine and what that means. Very mental. And then a lot of squares. The dream bot is this green circle. And that's the collective unconscious, otherwise known as the dream bot. And it's indicating that there's a power struggle. And that's not a surprise. Even in the astrology, we have Venus, even though she goes Cazimi and super strong, she's going to have a square, a multi-square over to Pluto. Pluto is the planet of power and control, among other things. And so the dream bot's all over that one, but it's still Venus. So the overlap is all this Venus thing. I could have called it more of a Venus energy, but you still have the eclipse. So we're competing with some really big, bold energies. And I guess we'll just go through them. We're going to talk about the Dreambot first. Actually, first we'll cover a little bit of the comments, and then we'll get started in the Dreambot and the astrology. So hang on. Here we go. All right. Have you subscribed yet? That's over on YouTube, National Dream Center, and it's over on Rumble. Same, National Dream Center, all one word. And here's a sampling of the awesome comments. So many awesome comments. I spend here an hour just going through them. So please don't think that I'm not reading them. I am. Of note, though, Age of Reason has a pretty cool question I've never considered. Is the collective unconscious able to influence the so-called stars and planets? Why are we under their astrological thumb? Effed up Sagittarius here wondering in the digital ether. I think that's an excellent question. By the way, here's an aside here. I have my snapshot of the Age of Reason's comment, and it says there's a reply, but I am not allowed to see it. Even in my backdoor administrator page, I can't see this reply. Does anybody know what that reply is? Can anybody see that? You want to take a snapshot of it, or just at least put it in quotes and in a comment here? I would like to know what comment that is. That is so bizarre that I'm not allowed to see that. But anyway, my answer to Age of Reason is, in the Law of One, they do talk about how as you accelerate or I guess ascend, and more than just mentally, but in a service to others or service to self, whatever avenue you prefer, that you get to this point in, I think, the 6th or 7th density where you become pure light. And in pure light, this is their theory, I guess, on the protons and the sun. The light from the sun is these living beings, supposedly, that dash through the space and give us heat and light. So, in a way, they're all combined. It's all one. That's my answer. I think that's my best answer. I don't have any other theories that might go one way or the other. Can we consciously affect that? Well, Cook kind of thinks so. Cook actually says this, and this is over on Rumble, by the way. Cook says, great content. Time is moving extremely fast. I believe it correlates with the awakening of the population so rapidly. The faster consciousness expands, the faster time feels. I think these are amazing insights and hypotheses and theories. I love these kind of things. Similar to when having fun, time seems to move faster. Take care and keep up the great work. So are these correlated? I think they pretty much are. I would say that can we directly influence? I think it takes higher levels of consciousness to do it, but according to some, we can. It's not very common, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of advancement, but I think you can. In what ways? I don't know. That's above my ability to understand. But time is relative, like Cook is saying. We can affect that. You can affect that in subconscious work, like hypnosis, or being in the flow. You can be in an activity so well it becomes a timeless activity. But anyway, it's fun thinking about all that stuff. Moving on, Not For Me to Say says, anyone else coming out of this week feeling a bit lost, confused, experiencing dread? I've got some answers for you. Not for me to say. I think consistently you've been ahead of the energies, just on the leading edge of these energies, because we're coming into this surf week with some really big tidal waves of energy, like I mentioned before. So hang on to your seats, but also, hey, has anybody felt that dread coming? I know I have. I don't think you're alone, Not For Me to Say. And then shout out to Anahita. I hope I pronounced that right, but shout out to you. Thank you so much for your hard work and insights, calm voice in the midst of this insane energy. Well, I hope to remain calm through this surf report, but man, shout out to you. And then the winner, because of 3 ups, we're kind of waning on these ups, by the way. All the rest of the folks had either 1 or 2 ups. And but anyway, YouTube shout out. You win the week's comment with first. Thank you. This is you.tube 1984. Way to go. Let's get to the Dreambot. This is the collective unconscious. This is what everybody's dreaming. And we look at surge scores. That's how this thing is laid out. That's the yellow column in the middle. The surge score is an algorithm, just a mathematical equation that looks at how often this word shows up in people's dreams all around the world in English. And then it compares it to that same word in previous days and weeks and averages and all that. So we're looking at high surge scores around 100 are rare, but they really do tend to show up before that particular thing shows up in the collective, like in the real world. So for example, like, what was it? The king abducts his throne. Basically those words showed up roughly 6. No, that one was like 2 days prior. You'd see these words commensurate with throne and not abdicate, but step down, some political kind of stuff in Spanish. So anyway, these surge scores are around 50 and 40 today. So pretty good, pretty high, because normally they're only around 10, 12, 17, something like that. On the lower end of our run, now this is a dictionary that's full of like 10,000 words. So these scores are at the very top. These are the positive scores. And the top of this is mention. So that's a very Mercury, thing and typed communication. But in the rest of the run, it turns more conflicted. Fight, monster, excited, very emotional. We do emotional attacks through emotional manipulation. A lot of times we don't even do it. This is a very Pluto thing because of the power struggles, the fight, the shot, the felt, the attack, etc. And so mention, even though it's more Mercury, is a much more commensurate with the bigger meme here, which is power struggles. That's definitely the Pluto and the square over to Venus. And then we have time, year, March, holiday, childhood, years, even stuck is a very time-oriented. So timeline, we have a new moon solar eclipse that is fairly close to the south node. And so that's sort of the past oriented. Plus it's in Scorpio, which doesn't have to be guaranteed past oriented, but with especially the obsessions, the rumination, and the even vengeance can be much more associated with the past because it never forgets. But then you have Uranus over the north node. That's obviously the future. Uranus is future. So you got both, and we're going to talk about both. Anyway, I don't want to confuse everybody, but that's the collective unconscious. And here's the astrology. I'll darken it just a touch so that you can still see it, but you can easier tell where my cursor is. All right, here we go. There's a lot to see on this overview chart. The retrograde planets are changing. At the start of October, we had quite a few, and by the end, we're going to add Mars to that. That's going to be the next CIRF report. Mars will go retrograde, and then we have an ending to Saturn. Midweek this CIRF week, Saturn's going to go direct, and so that's going to shake things up on the Grand Air Trine. And we also have an exact with the Cazimi. That's Venus and the Sun perfectly conjunct. That happens 22nd, 23rd. So they'll go hand in hand in the last days of Libra and then move into Scorpio, where the moon will meet up for a new moon / eclipse on the 25th. And Venus technically still within a conjunction, but not a perfect conjunction. So now we're back to combust. We'll get into all this and what it means energetically. 23rd seems like a big to-do, a big day, because a lot of these activities go exact. We have a lot of squares. There's no T-square, but there's going to be a phenomenon that I'm going to show you here, and I'll show you right now, actually. On Thursday, the 20th. Now, there's no Grand Air Trine. That's going to happen in a couple of days with Mercury progressing a little bit further. You have, just to catch you up on where everything is, you've got Venus and Sun technically inside of an 8-degree orb, otherwise known as a combust, Venus combust. And it's said to be weakened because she's too close to the Sun. So strong in that she's in Libra, but weak because she's too close to the Sun. Now, as we paradoxically get even closer to the Sun, now we enter into what's called Cazimi, Venus Cazimi. Now, this one, we do this a lot with Mercury. Occasionally, I can't remember how many times per year, we'll be doing this with Venus as well. But this one, because Venus and the Sun are in, Venus going direct is going to be in the same direction as the Sun. So the Cazimi is going to take almost 3 days. All right. So we're going to get a strengthened Venus for quite like almost half of our CIRF week. And that's going to be magical. That's going to be in Libra. So a super strong Venus in Libra is going to make for some great abundance. You know what else is great abundance? With Venus in conjunct or changing and adapting to Jupiter, so a positive spin on things, and the planet of excess. So we've got a great abundance planet already, Super Venus in Libra, adjusting to even more excessiveness and even more positive things. So I'll show you those 3 days, but that's not happening right now. Right now, on Thursday the 20th, Venus is weakened because she's combust. And she's also square over to Pluto. Pluto is no longer in retrograde. So I forgot that in our summary slide up there above. But goal-oriented Pluto, so goal-oriented, achievement-based transformation, very practical transformations happening. It sort of matches Uranus in Taurus, does it not? These are very transformational planets. Uranus is quick change and insight, even technological change, but it's in the material world, otherwise known as Taurus, so very practical change into the future. And then you have Pluto in a practical sense with Capricorn, climbing up mountains and getting something done with this transformation. There's a rhyme or reason to the death and rebirth. That's another Pluto archetype. And then death, I already said death and rebirth, and breakdown, breakthrough. It's another one. So very transformative. But a square in between Venus, Sun, square Pluto means there's this big pressure for power, for control, for transformation. And it's a weakened Venus. Then the other thing I noticed is, so not quite the Grand Air Trine, so let's not talk about that yet. That'll be later. We have, if you're going to notice, so this square touches what's going to be one corner of the Grand Air Trine. And then you have this corner, the Mars corner, with a double square over to Neptune and Jupiter. So there's a pressure there on that point, what's going to be the Grand Air Trine. And then you have that old Uranus square Saturn. Saturn going direct later, but the point here is another square. Every point of that Grand Air Trine is going to have a pressure pump. It's going to be this conflicted energy, this stagnant energy is adding focus to it, but it's a pressure to get that item done. And so in this case, it's a focus on power and control in your relationships and your weakened relationships. And really until Venus goes Cazimi. And then the only other thing is a lot of adjustments. These are in conjuncts, 130, 135 degrees, I believe. And in most theories in astrology, we're looking at some adjustments and alterations. So a little bit more change. Not always positive, not always negative, but just some sort of adapting. So, and there's a lot of adapting. All right, let's get into Friday the 21st. This is at 1:42, so this is Central Time, Central Daylight Savings Time in the North America. And this is when Venus Cazimi begins in Libra, because we're within 17 minutes. Very close, both at 28 degrees Libra and Venus at 4 minutes, Sun at 21 minutes. Very, very close. 17 minutes is nothing. And this will predicate or preface, this will be initiating the Cazimi, or the super strong Venus. Venus all about beauty, harmony, even artwork, creativity, fairness, diplomacy is a good one, mediation. Those are some good archetypes, and those are going to be all super strong. Are we going to see those outcomes? I think so, but I think it's more of a feeling. These are all feelings. So these urges for all those things, urge for relationship, for love, for romance, it increases starting on the afternoon of Friday the 21st, and it will go through. Let me scroll here really quick so I can get you the closing date is 7:37 on Sunday. So all weekend, and that Cazimi will end in the evening of Sunday. So right now it's starting. We still don't have our grand air trine, but the energies are gearing up for it. A lot of conflicted energy, a lot of pressure. And this one, I think, is what not for me to say is feeling. In my opinion, it is sort of a doom. That's the other archetype for Pluto, and this is the sort of the magnet to it. The attention. Hey, doom, 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 and we can start losing feeling. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. We can start feeling like we're losing control in this alignment, and so what do? Scamper for more control. Everyone's doing this. So now you have power struggles, especially now with, well, what used to be a weakened Venus, but now as Venus gets even closer to the sun with a perfect conjunction and Cazimi, we're looking at a super strong, super glorious, super abundant Venus starting at 1:42 Central Time on Friday the 21st. And remember, Venus, super strong, is adjusting to even more positivity and optimism and exaggeration and extreme abundance. So that whole thing is the alignment for what the I-Ching is talking about, great abundance. Oh, this is a mouthful. Then we have Uranus over the North Node. That's 4 degrees away, just for your edification. So we're still looking at insights into the future. We're still looking at futuristic technology, etc., etc. Change in the timeline. You know what? The other thing I thought of is Uranus is out of time almost sometimes. It signs up for so much and gets a lot done, and in terms of its ability to change and how fast it changes, but it can sort of run out of time some cases. So no. Now let's get into Saturday the 22nd. Grand Air Trine begins with Mercury. So we've got Sun, Venus still not quite there. So they're 3 minutes away from each other. So just barely apart. And they are not quite yet in parallel, but they will be by the eclipse time, meaning that in inclination or declination, the Venus and Sun will be in the same vertical piece of sky going into the eclipse. Beautiful, beautiful. Extra Cazimi. And now Mercury in Libra. So thoughts associated with these Venus/Libra things, diplomacy and love, and just thinking about that becomes ever more strong because there's a grand air trine. And Saturn on this side makes things the foundation, maybe limitation, challenges. So challenges your thinking, easy to challenge your thinking along those ways. Maybe that casts doubt. Maybe that accelerates or gets you overly, thinking too much about an item. And then you have a super trine over to Mars, and Mars can in Gemini, so can sign up for a lot of tasks and do some quick action, speedy responses, and logical action, logical to-do list. Makes a lot of sense to those who think rationally. And around and around we go with the grand air trine. Now, this is a time to look at how much these squares are on each point. So first point, Mars has a double square, Neptune and Jupiter. And then we have Saturn has the square over to Uranus. And then, that's not there yet, but it will be. And then Mercury will have its square as well, making for this pumping action, pumping more pressure into the grand air trine. Actually, it's not separate. I'll mention it again once we find that alignment. And it is here. So on Sunday the 23rd, you can see this action. It's really starting to organize itself. These planets and the alignments are starting to organize for our eclipse. And you can see the organization here. We're going to go from 3 squares right now to 4 squares as soon as the moon makes its final cycle into the sun to make a new moon. You're going to see 4 squares to Pluto. We're going to see 4 trines over to Mars. But right now it's already organizing. You got the inconjunct, so adapting is into this. You got the mental, logical communication emphasis with the grand air trine, but it's all pressurized by the multiple squares here on all points of the grand air trine. This is the end of the Cazimi, 7:37 Central Time, Daylight Savings Time. Ironically, at the same time, Saturn is going direct. So now we've got new challenges. Whew, thank goodness. Instead of the same old challenges. We got new challenges. Who wants new challenges? Aren't the old ones that's just same old challenges? Aren't those easier? Well, now we've got new ones. We've got new scarcities, new limitations, and it's all newness towards Aquarius. So at least we have that going for us. The good part of Saturn is that it strengthens as it challenges. It hones as it, you get a defender. Now you've got to move past this stressor, and it's not just testing you, it's giving you the gift of honing your skills and making you stronger and making you sharper. So we're going to be sharpening and strengthening in Aquarius. So knowledge is going to get better. Friendliness is going to get better. Disclosure, more secrets are going to be revealed. All right. Especially as Saturn stations, i.e., is making the transition from retrograde, slows down, stops, and then apparently moves back direct. And that's the time where this influence is going to be the strongest. And it's on the same day that Cazimi ends. Also, at 7:37, Venus has passed, by definition, is 17 degrees past the sun now. So Cazimi is ending, but it's in Scorpio. So they made this transition on Sunday, the 23rd, and you're going to feel this energetic shift from justice and equilibrium and balance towards more of ruminating, obsessing, passions, very passionate. Scorpios are passionate. Without Scorpio, would we have any passion? So Venus, especially during the strong part, during the Cazimi part, is passionate about all things Venus. And maybe picks up a new flag, a new value, a new cross to bear. As anything that's really passionate, values, and Venus is going to run with that, especially in relationships and anything having to do interpersonally. I think that's the main things on Sunday the 23rd. On the 24th, we're really just getting in preparation for a partial solar eclipse with that organizing energy. Look at that. You've got 4 squares. That's Mercury, Moon, Sun, and Venus square over to Pluto. So that alignment gets even stronger. That pressure gets even more significant. And the only point here on the Grand Air Trine technically is Mercury. And that's ironic because it is a air trine, most akin to all things Mercury, communication, transportation, get along with everybody, mediation. So, and then look at how each point of the Grand Air Trine is being pumped up by more squares. But it's organizing. That's the point. 4 over here, 4 squares, 4 inconjuncts, and all the points of the Grand Air Trine having some extra squares. All right, so here's the partial solar eclipse in Scorpio. It is conjunct. This is Tuesday the 25th at 5:48 a.m. Daylight Savings Time, Central Time, North America. Whew. There's a lot. But look how organized it is. That's the first thing I want to show you. So these energies that we're going to have are much stronger than we would normally ever feel. Right? Because if there's only one square over here, which there wouldn't be, there would be 2 because moon and sun together is the new moon / partial solar eclipse. And you can see down here, real small letters, sun is parallel with moon. That makes this an eclipse because parallel is determined by 17 minutes, but in inclination. And sun is also parallel with Venus. So not only are they in the same horizontal space, there's the same vertical space as well. Same piece of sky. Moon, sun, Venus. Venus is at 2 degrees 40 minutes, and the sun and the moon take this eclipse at 2 degrees 0 minutes of Scorpio. Incidentally, I don't know why this is so interesting to me, but when we get into the Rave mandala or the human design hexagrams, this is the start of what will be hexagram 28, but it's exactly the start of the hexagram. Moon and sun at 2 degrees 0 minutes of Scorpio is exactly the start. The window, that small tiny window of hexagram or gate 28 in the Rave. So I thought that was very profound, especially when we start talking about what that gate really means. And we'll get there. Whew. All right, so we've got a new moon. This is in Scorpio. It's conjunct with Venus, but Venus in this case is weakened, but there's an emphasis on things with Venus. Remember, this is a timestamp because it's a solar eclipse. Around 6 months is this cycle, and so this timestamp, very organized chart, becomes the predominating energy for the next 6 months. Start a new passion is what Scorpio sort of means practically, because it's a new moon. It's a time to start something new, a new phase. And being a 6-month cycle, this is a really good opportunity to get something of great value for yourself done. Now you can also, because we're in that sort of speck of sky with the south node, that's 11 degrees away. So it's not a conjunction, but it still is in that space. So you're going to have an inkling or a really subtle influence of past. And I mentioned that Scorpio can tend to be very past oriented. So it might behoove you in this new moon solar eclipse to rekindle an old passion, one that maybe died out, and maybe rekindle it. Or you can feel free to change it some way, maybe based on the learning that you get by looking into the past. And there's another aloneness that might be indicated here because we do have Venus, or our interpersonal planet, Venus, with love, understanding, mediation. She's weakened. So peace is weakened. Harmony is weakened. And so this might be the best time to just do your passion or rekindle an old passion on your own so that you don't end up in this power struggle. That's this alignment here you've got 4 squares over to Pluto. So big pressure, big influence, big attention on the whole power continuum. I'm out of control. Things are being destroyed. I better start controlling everything. And it's all perceptions, but it creates these power struggles, and it's all subconscious for most of us, unless you know what you're looking for. All done in the emotions, and Scorpio has a lot of them. A lot of obsessive emotions, but common big themes that keep recurring, big patterns. So we all have the patterns, but Scorpio has much more emotions and can tend to control. So, and incidentally, Pluto, which I didn't mention before, is ruler of Scorpio, one of the rulers, and so is said to be energetically disconnected from home. And that means that Pluto is making a bigger vie for being at home or energetically feeling at home. And this is the biggest distance, energetic distance, is the square. It's a multi-square, 4 squares away. So there's this pressure to be home and never feeling further away from home. And that's unsettling for our transformational planet Pluto. Okay, so also in the next 6 months in this snapshot, you're going to have 4 on a quad trine over to Mars. Mars being the other ruler of Scorpio. But there is alignment. This one is easy, return home. So now this pumped up energy with power and control can pump up the grand air trine, but especially over to Mars. Mars is easy energy back to home, and that makes this back and forth really easy. So we can make our obsessions easily into translated behaviors. Yang, Mars, and passionate action and the projects that you pick up. So still, again, great time to start something new. That's new moon with your passion. That's Scorpio, and be able to really get something of value done. Maybe rekindling an old passion. That's all matches here. And then we have the inconjunct, or the adjustments that you need to make based on the wisdom of Jupiter. And it is past, because it's retrograde, past oriented wisdom, or maybe Jupiter being finance and wealth. So you have a weakened finance, maybe a localized paying bills, and this is the Venus aspect, having to adjust with the bigger picture of the markets, and it's not necessarily bad or pressured, but there is an adjustment between the two. And you have to look at it the other way around, because they're connected by the inconjunct. The greater markets, the concept of wealth has to be adjusted based on weakened, localized finance, budgeting and stuff like that. So they're not two separate ones. They're all integrated, and they're changing and morphing and adapting to each other. Whew. There's a lot here, but the one thing I really wanted to point out is at least we've got everything really nicely organized and packeted, but realize that makes everything stronger. Everything that you see here, much stronger. That's why I said tidal waves of big energy. You had the Venus Cazimi. You now have the partial solar eclipse with a weakened Venus, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, that's enough there. Wednesday, the last day of our CIRF report. For Scorpio planets, so heavy Scorpio-ness to this, plus or minus 24 hours of the new moon. And of course, the eclipse, that snapshot of this taking 6 months of cycle. and patterned throughout that 6 months. Nothing, no real big changes here that I've noted, but see how disorganized it is again. So it came in nicely organized for the eclipse, and now it's all sort of chaos again. All right, here we are. Great abundance. This is hexagram 55, and it's a total match with Venus Cazimi in conjunct Jupiter, but Venus is in Libra, so home, and it is. It's just great abundance. This is like the sun at midday, a high noon of clarity, insight, and progress. Whether this refers to a national cycle, a business boon, or a period of personal abundance, peak periods can be brief. This one is 2.5 days, so it is important to bale your hay while the sun is shining. So that might mean if you get an increase in finance or money, before the end of that, maybe sell out, but it is the weekend, so you may not have a say in getting out of investments during that time. But there'll be other hays to bale in your life, right? Like conclude maybe some great times with family and friends or loved ones, or having a great date, whatever it is. Conclude that with maybe some nice comments before the end of the Cazimi. And there's other possible archetypes that you could use in that. Just giving you some examples. During a period of abundance, it is skillful to show benevolence and to share fruits of one's good fortune. Now, line 3 says a recent success is eclipsed. Isn't that incredible? He actually uses the word eclipse. A recent success is eclipsed by a fast-moving element that could snatch the reins from your hands. In the confusion, small-minded or self-serving people may be gaining power, which makes it impossible to accomplish much at present. Though you are not to blame, a time of loss and difficulty may follow, but only for a while. What this I-Ching to me is representing is the wand of power. I'm going to go back to the eclipse, because this is where we climax with this energy. The power, the wand is transitioning. This is a transition both as above and so below. And so maybe in your personal life, power is transitioning, power and control, but so is the collective. And the power, according to the I-Ching, is being given to the smaller guy, smaller gal, or the smaller us, right? The ones who didn't have the power before. We are the majority, but we didn't feel like we had much power. Well, that is all changing now, right? And that's due to the square from everything, the eclipse and Venus, over to Pluto. All right, now make that change and you get shock. Here's the solution. This is not a influence shock. You're not going to be shocked. It's asking you to act in accordance with the shock suggestions. So that is this. The critical factor is a willingness to be open to fear rather than running away from it, enabling you to transform anxiety into laser-sharp perception. There can be a positive side to shock. This is a continuation of last week's clarity theme, but it's only one of the items for suggestion. The others are the wise look into and search their hearts for strengths to face the world with courage. It is essential that your inner compass be aligned to the magnetic force that guides you towards fulfillment of your deepest desires and your highest destiny. Prepare yourself to take some jarring surprise in stride. Meditate a little bit to find your center. A calm reaction to the losses and gains that may arise will help you surmount these shocks to your system. So there may or may not be shocks apparent in like headlines. I don't think really any of us get shocked anymore at what's coming. Probably most of us expecting to be shocked, which is not really technically a form of shock. But nonetheless, it's asking you basically to prepare. And the preparation is not tensing all up and gritting and get your teeth all tight and all that stuff. It's relaxing. It's fostering more courage to not run and turn and run anymore. It's face the fear, face the monster. Okay. Now that's what it's suggesting. And then here's our conversion chart. Remember that nice eclipse organized chart. So we had sun and moon at 2 degrees, 0 minutes. You also had, incidentally, we have Venus at 2 degrees, 40 minutes. And you're going to see that's in the same hexagram of the rave, which is 28. And then we also have Virgo, the sidereal solution Virgo. So hexagram 28 in the rave is preponderance of the great. It says the transitoriness of power and influence. Mind blown. Okay, we talked about the astrology and how the square on Pluto is making this transition of power. Well, the rave mandala agrees with it. So we have a double confirmation that over the next 6 months, this power and control is a huge shift. It's a huge shift. Gives me chills just thinking about all these overlaps. But line 1, preparation, look at that. It says it starts at 2 degrees Scorpio, 0 minutes, exactly where the eclipse is, right there at the beginning. And then Venus is also in this line. So it's 3 planets in the rave on this line. Very important line to read out. It's the desire to be effective, manifested in the application of energy to detail. Remember last week we were getting details, we were getting clarity. That was about it, and then sharing it. This week it's about not just getting the detail, it's application of that detail, energy, application of the energy to the detail, the intuition to potentially apply energy to detail. Then on the downside, so this is Venus combust, when Venus is outside of Friday the 21st and the Sunday the 23rd, Venus is in upscale or Cazimi. Outside of that, she's in combust. So this line is important. The aesthetic appreciation of planning that may have no real application, and intuition for detail without the potential for application. So the key here on this context in this rave is how well do you apply the energy of the detail that you found, the clarity. So take last week, get the clarity. Now this week is action, and it's direct action with the application of that detail that you found. All right. Let's get over here. And this is a beautiful piece of artwork that I found for our picture, to picture represent the energy. I can't say it's just one energy. I tried and tried. I've really contemplated a long time on that. But in this week, it's a lot of different energies, but it is organized. And because it's organized, those energies that we talked about are going to be more profound, more in your face, higher levels felt. Okay. So the overview of this energy this week is that super Venus, I'm calling Venus Cazimi super Venus, not because she's in apogee or perigee or whatever. It's because it's Cazimi, both in vertical and horizontal with the sun. Transits from Libra to Scorpio and then returns to a weakened combust for the solar eclipse in Scorpio. Obsessive mental infatuation. So we have several things here. Obsessive is Scorpio, and mental infatuation is the grand air trine. And that's infatuation with abundance, peace, harmony, art, togetherness, negotiation, mediation, diplomacy, creativity, etc. These are all the things that are Venus. and mainly the Venus Cazimi. Then a 6-month cycle of transforming power and control while Venus struggles. Venus is back to combust. Stand by while the baton of power is being passed to the meek and the karmically sound, with an I-Ching of 55 that we read. Tidal waves of big energy. All right. So for the solution triangulation, here we go. We got the I-Ching 51. It's openness to face your fear. Do not assume it's tragedy or unpleasant events, but foster courage and grit. Any sort of change and adaptation is a shock to the system because you have to adapt to it. So it doesn't have to be unpleasant or a tragedy. Doesn't mean something bad is necessarily going to happen. It could be very good, but it's shocking to the system, right? Rave Mandala says gate 28. It's a big one because you got a solar eclipse there and you got a Venus there. It's preparation, preponderance of the great preparation, the transitoriness of power and influence. And you have to apply the details or not and be unsuccessful. And then you got Virgo. So here we go. Last week's solution in large part continues, except this week's clarity and details will need to be channeled into applied behaviors. For starters in the I-Ching, open your heart without fear. Foster courage and grit for any possible shock to the system or to our collective psyche or to just your routine or everyday experience. Next, use the sidereal Virgo traits of detailed analysis and hard work to prepare for the rave's inference that power and control are in transition. And not just this week, but over the course of the next 6 months, because we have a solar eclipse, as perfectly matched by Virgo's alignments with the eclipse and her hard square with Pluto. This week's events start a massive shift in power and influence over the next 6 months. Those of us who remain fearless, courageous, hardworking, and responsible with well-applied details will be the successors in this power transition. The meek and the properly prepared will inherit the earth, and so it shall be. I am contemplating this phrase for whatever's coming, and it says, although I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. All right, probably one of the longer ones, but it was warranted and might take some review over the course of the next few months, because this energy is the pattern that we should expect seeing until the next eclipse season. In a couple of weeks, we have another eclipse, the lunar eclipse. I haven't even looked at that. There's so much astrology here. We will take a look at that in the meantime in the next CIRF report when we have kind of a lull period. And so we'll have a couple of weeks to prepare for, or at least an extra week to prepare for the next eclipse. But let's just focus on this for now and get through this one. And then we'll talk about the next eclipse and where you're going to see that. By the way, for those of you who are still here, this solar eclipse is not going to be seen anywhere except for mainly the Eastern Europe area and the Western Asia area. So in that grouping there, ironically, right over, I think, where most of the alleged conflict is happening, Ukraine and Russia. Not quite sure about that, but I think that's correct. The partial solar eclipse will be seen there. Will that have more effect than all the rest? I don't think so. I don't think just because you can't see it does not mean that you're not going to be able to experience the change. So, all right, that's all I have, everybody. I appreciate your support, comments, and let me know how we're doing. I appreciate you. Have a great week. We will see you again next week. Bye now.